I'm Warwick Schiller. This is my lovely friend, Jane Pike, and we're here to talk about competition, preparation for competition. I'm probably going to be talking more about the horse side of preparation for competition, and I imagine Jane being an equine mental coach or something like that. What do you call yourself?
A Christian mental skills coach. Just writing psychology.
Yeah, okay, very good. So Jane will be talking about that, won't you, Jane?
Yes.
Okay, you want to kick us off? Oh, okay. Where do I start on getting ready for competition? I would say, in my experience, from all the questions people have asked me and stuff, people have trouble with competition because they go to a competition knowing their horse cannot actually do the thing they're planning to do when they get there at home. Does that make sense? Like, for me, preparing the horse to go to competition has so many facets to it. First, they've got to be able to do everything they're going to need to be able to do at the competition, at home, with no problems. That's the skills part of the competition part. But then you've got the away from home part, you've got all the other horses part, you've got the atmosphere part. So for me, I would want to make sure all those things worked individually. So something I suggest people do, well, one of the things that I talk about a lot training horses is change one thing at a time. And a lot of people will change like 10 things at a time. They'll take a horse who's never been away from home, and they want to take it away from home to a competition where there's a lot of people, there's a lot of atmosphere, and expect it to be perfect, and it usually ends up in a bit of bother. With the young reining horses, when we start taking them to competitions, good morning, Jackie. We start taking them to competitions, we don't ever take them to competitions with the intent of competing on them. A lot of the reining shows we go to are 3 or 4 days long, so we will take those young horses, probably 6 months before we plan on showing them for the first time, we'll start taking the horse shows. So they'll be at the show, and when I get there, I start like in a little world and whacked out. I pretend they've never been handled before, and I would start doing the groundwork stuff. If they're good with that, I'll start riding them, but I'm not expecting them to be what they were at home. I'm going to start back at the beginning again. And some of those young horses, you go to their first show like that, and you're like, this horse wants to be a show horse. I don't need to go back to another show until it's time to compete, because the whole show experience they can take in quite easily. But then you have other horses like, he needs to go on the horse boat every time it leaves home for the next 6 months to ensure the best chance of that. And I have a lot of people go, well, you know, it costs a lot of money to go to horse shows. I can't afford to take my horse to a show and not compete on it. And I go, okay, well, let's say you take him and you win your dressage competition. How much money do you win? And they go, well, I don't win anything. And I said, so you're telling me it costs you the same to give your horse a good experience as it does a bad experience? Does that make sense there? So try to think about, if you want to go and compete on a horse, you have to take in the horse factor on it. You have to take in, you know, they're going to get concerned when you're away from home, they're going to be concerned about environment and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, one of the first things I recommend people do is start taking your horse away from home, not to a show. Just think about it in here. Like, listen to all that atmosphere in here, you know. There's a lot of atmosphere at horse shows, especially if you go to an A&P show, if you get all the side shows and all that sort of stuff. I'd suggest taking the horse away from home to a friend's house. Or to your local showground or whatever, where there's nothing going on. You know, first you want to change the location, and then you want to change the location and add something else, which might be other horses, and then change the location, other horses, and a lot of atmosphere. You know, like when people are gonna, horses are very good at reading energy and stuff. When you go to a horse show and there's a lot of nervous people there, it changes the energy of what's going on there.
I think that's a really important part of feeding into the strategy as well, because what we do, just as part of the way that our minds work, is that we like to take lots of different separate pieces of information and group them together under one title. It's like driving a car. You know, when you start driving a car, if you can think back to when you first started to learn to drive a car, especially if it's a manual car, you had to, you know, be able to change gear and put your foot on the clutch and the brake and the accelerator and check where everyone is, you know, in front of you and behind you, and all of those separate pieces took quite a lot of conscious energy in the first instance until it became driving a car. And now you get in and you don't think about the separate components that create that one thing, you know, and it's the same with competition, where a lot of people that come to me or that I work with, they go exactly like from home to competition, and like they expect the same result to be replicated in both environments, and really you have to deconstruct each part, each different situation, and treat it like a part.
Yeah, and eventually you get to a thing that they call chunking. So there's a really good book called The Talent Code, I think, by a fellow named Daniel Coyle, and he talks in there about chunking information, and after a while you start to chunk stuff. But initially he said, it's like the saying that says, letters become words, then words become phrases, and phrases become sentences, and sentences become paragraphs, and paragraphs become chapters, and chapters become books. You know, it's just about starting out with little things. But in what he calls chunking, he said, okay, let's say I'm going to have you guys think, I'm going to tell you a sentence, and I want you to be able to repeat it back to me. How many words are you going to do? It was a cold day watching Warwick and Jane at Equidays. What did I just say? Everybody got it right, and it was like 11 words. You know, if I said to you 11 words in Latin, you wouldn't be able to repeat them back to me. Because what you just did, you chunked. It's a cold day watching Warwick and Jane at Equidays. You don't have to remember three things, okay? Because you can chunk. Okay, now horses we don't chunk. Like I said, if I said it to you in Latin, you'd have to learn every one of those words, because the first three words wouldn't be relatable to each other. Well, it was a cold day. It was a cold day. So you chunk the first 5 words, okay? Because you have experience with that. You haven't had experience with Latin. And just think about the same thing with your horse. You really would like to teach them the words one at a time. I think it might be in that book. They did a test with chess masters. Okay? People were amazing at chess, and they could think so many moves ahead, and they're all very amazing. But it only works if the thing they have to remember is a chess move. If you change the rules to where a queen can move somewhere it shouldn't be able to move, and a king, they couldn't remember anything because they can't chunk it. Does that make sense there? So we all do.
It's the same with phone numbers, like when you repeat them. I remember my phone number like 0210-297-8058. And if I say it to someone on the phone and they repeat it back to me and they go 02019, I'm like, I don't know that that's my number. Like I have to, that's not the way that I repeated it, said it to you, so I'm going to need to check back on that.
See, I used to have trouble when I first went to America, because in America your area codes are 3 numbers and then your phone number is 7 numbers. Okay? Whereas in Australia it was 2 numbers followed by 6 numbers. And so like my phone number growing up, 822526. Whereas in America it was different, and I used to have trouble remembering phone numbers because it just didn't follow the same process. It's not like I feel I had to remember numbers. And so I think that's not just human learning, but horse learning too. And so think about that chunking thing. I think about, like for me, training horses, I break things down into pieces, like let's go through some real simple stuff. When I first get on a young horse, I might work on lateral flexion, which can you respond to the left rein? Can you respond to the right rein? We're learning them separately. And I'm going to go, can you disengage? So can you respond? Can you move over off my left? Can you respond off my left leg? Can you engage your hind leg off my left leg? Can you engage your hind leg off my right leg? And when I get those two working, I'm going to go, now I'm going to go forward. Now I'm going to ask you to respond to this leg at the same time. If they don't know how to do this one, they don't know how to do this one, they're not going to do that one. So I think everything, not just the competition one, it's all about being able to break it down into pieces and have all the pieces work really well. And I mentioned before, something I see a lot of people struggle with is they want to go to a horse show and have their horse be perfect in front of a judge when they're doing this, and at home they can't even get it perfect at home. Like it's a struggle to have it good at home. Like think about this: if you want to go and do something like a running pattern dressage test or whatever, if you can't get through the whole thing at home without it falling to pieces, and then you go to a show and you can't get through it without falling to pieces, you're going to trust it. Like, no wonder it's going to be terrible. You kind of knew it was going to be terrible. You know what I mean? So you can either know it's going to be like that and go, hey, I'm just going to go for the experience, and then you're not frustrated because it was what it was, or you go, okay, I'm serious about this, I want to get it good.
To me, it's very progressive. Like the way that I treat any sort of mental fitness training is not like a one-hit wonder. It's a constant practice that you cultivate. And just like you would go to the gym, or if you had a 10k run to do on the weekend and you never ran before, you wouldn't just go running on Friday night and then wonder why it was kind of tough on Saturday. But that's what we do mentally. Like we know that, many of us anyway, know that we have certain patterns of behaviour or ways that things go when we are in pressurised environments. And really, to me, that's the context that we talk in as well. Like it could be competition, but equally it could be a clinic or a lesson or something which represents for you riding outside of where you normally ride. And that's something that you need to practice, I use an example of, I looked out my window one day and I saw my 7-year-old son doing laps around the lawn. And I thought, what's he doing? And I said, Glenn, what are you doing? And he said, oh, I'm training for the cross-country race tomorrow. And I was like, I laughed to myself, and I thought, well, that's what so many people do that come to me. It's like, what can I do? It's Friday night, I've got the thing tomorrow. Tell me what to do to keep my head in the right space. And so it's in as much as you work your body out and develop those muscles, your mental muscles are really the same. And that's where there's a lot of crossover in terms of if you feel a specific way with your riding or with your horse training, chances are that's not the only area where you are experiencing those challenges. Because if you have a habit of seeking out the negative when you ride, you probably do it at work, and you probably do it with yourself, and you probably do it with your partner. That's a negative focus. You've trained your focus in the wrong direction. And so if you can think of it as developing a mental fitness plan where you're actually working out, you're making conscious decisions that direct you to what it is you need to be thinking in the context that you want to get the best out of yourself, then that's the way that really I approach it from the get-go.
Yeah, and it's for me, like I said, I'm going to be talking more about the horse part of it. Jen's going to talk about the mental part of it. A lot of people, they go, oh, I can't do all that slow stuff because I'm really competitive. I'm really competitive. Let me tell you what really competitive people do. The slow stuff. When you think you're competitive and you think, I don't have time to do that, I just want to get down, I just want to win. That's not what the really competitive people do. I was talking to Rob Aarons last night. So he's the Dutch Olympic show jumping coach. And we're talking about clinics and doing clinics. And I said, what I tend to find is doing clinics all over the world is I'm always starting to start. Most people don't have the beginning ready. He goes, oh, yeah, exactly. He said, I rarely ever get to do a clinic with any show jumpers who are ready to go up. They're all stuck at a place and they want to go up. And he says, we've got to go back to the beginning to get good. If you would think in terms of sports, would you think Olympic athletes, Olympic level people are competitive? Sure they are. And how do they get there? By getting the first bit right, by taking all the steps. And I think, a lot of people, like I said, they go, well, I can't do this stuff, I'm really competitive, I want to win. People who are really competitive are prepared to do all the work it takes to win. And, it's just amazing. Every time I'm around someone like Rob, doesn't matter what discipline it is, or even if I'm around sports people or whatever, the elite level people just take care of the basics. I did a clinic in England a few years ago. There was a fella sitting in the front row, and the first day of the clinic I started out talking about basics, get the basics good. And this guy's sitting there, like everybody else is going kind of cross-eyed, and this guy's sitting there and his head's going up and down. And I said, you must be really, really good with horses. And he goes, no, he says, you're just getting into horses. I said, you're really good at something, like you're an elite level, something. What do you do? He says, I'm the coach of the English women's cricket team. No, not women's under-19s cricket team. The coach of the English under-19s cricket team. And I said, okay, quick, tell us all the story about basics. And he said, okay, so we do this thing at practice we call drop ball. So it's a batting practice. You do it on a concrete cricket pitch, so so there's no irregularities in it. You use tennis balls, and the batsman, you have to stand up, Robin. The batsman stands here, and someone has a big laundry basket full of tennis balls, and they pick one up, they hold it waist tight, they drop it. And this guy here has to hit the ball into the ground and hit that garbage bin. Do that 50 times in a row. Then he's got to hit the ball into the ground and hit that garbage bin. He's got to be able to direct it, but they practice this over and over and over. And the bounce is really predictable. Like you just working on it over and over and over. And he said, and the kids hate it. Okay? Bloody drop ball again. He said, so a friend of his is the cap. She's the opening batsman of the English women's cricket team. I didn't know there was such a thing, but there is such a thing. She's the opening batsman of the English women's cricket team. She can hit sixes like nobody can. And she was in town, and she called him and she said, can I come to training? He said, sure. So he gets to training and he says, hey, lads, we've got a special guest here today. We've got this friend of mine. She's the opening batsman of the English women's cricket team, and all these kids know she is. And she says, I'm going to practice with you guys. And they're like, cool, they're thinking, we're going to learn how to hit sixes. And so the coach said, well, what do you want to do? She goes, oh, I'll do a couple of hundred drop balls first. And they're all like, we don't want to do drop balls. That's being competitive. Is getting those basics really, really, really good. And when you get the basics good, the big things are easy. Like when I was talking to Rob, he goes, no one's to jump big. Jumping big is easy. Getting the little jumps good is really hard. 2 years ago, there was another jumping guy, Albert Vaughan from the Netherlands. So Albert is an Olympic silver medalist in the show jumping. And I did a clinic outside, and then Albert was in right after I was in. And then 45 minutes later, I had to go and do another demo, but I wanted to watch this thing of Albert's because it was jumping in metre 50. So did anybody watch the Grand Prix jumping last night? Big jumps, aren't they? That's a metre 35. This much bigger than that is what the clinic was on. You had to jump a metre 50, and I'm like, I want to know how to jump a metre 50. I was there for 45 minutes. You had 3 riders. They didn't even go over a ground rider. Didn't even go over a jump that big. I don't know how to jump a metre 50, but I do know that for the first 45 minutes he said, no, your horse is not ready to do that because it can't do this without the jump. So it's really all about the basics, and that's with the horses, and I'm sure Jane's going to talk about the basics with your mental side.
I think it's also important to strike a differential between skill set and mindset, because many of us are able to do the movements that are required that we need on the day. For instance, on a Friday, if you're training your horse and you have a reining horse or a dressage horse or a jumping horse, and you know that for the most part you can 80% of the time.
You just said horse.
Horse.
Did you catch that? She said.
I've turned, people. I've gone American.
You said a reining horse.
Horse.
A dressage. No. You said a reining horse, dressage horse, and then a jumping horse. You went New Zealand, American, New Zealand. She's going in and out of character.
What was I talking about?
Skill set,
Friday night.
words.
So Friday night you can be preparing for the competition. This is a really common situation. You'll be in training, you'll be doing the thing. It's pretty easy. For the most part, 80% of the time, let's say, you're able to hit the mark. You can jump the jump, you can do the move that you're doing in the dressage test. The next day, you get to the competition, and it's like you've never ridden before. You can't remember which leg is left and right, things just go out the window. What has changed is not your skill set. You don't forget how to do those things from one day to the next. It's your mindset. And I think that emotional agility as well, the ability to maintain the same emotional state that allowed you to ride the way you did the day before in a different environment under pressure, is a skill that needs to be developed for the rider as much as it needs to be developed for the horse. And some of the pieces that get left out are one or the other. We've either worked a lot on ourselves or we forget to emotionally equip our horse for pressurized environments. And then behavioural issues that come up are really just anxiety issues or an inability to cope with the pressure. But the best way that I've come to think about this is to really understand your emotional state. So if on a Friday night you are riding and things are going well, for the most part you're quite process oriented. Your focus is internal. You're focusing on what you need to do to get the horse to be able to do the certain thing that you want them to do, yeah? When you go to a competition, generally the focus, if you're feeling a bit off-kilter, goes to the outside. You get focused on results, you get focused on opinions, you get worried about what other people think. And you go from being like, what do I need to do right now to do this? And be solution-oriented in terms of my horse is a little bit offline, so I'll get him online, or whatever example pertains to your particular discipline, to like, what's over there? Oh, there's a horse spooking. I hope my horse doesn't spook at that. And so you become very reactive as opposed to responsive. So that's one of the biggest shifts that happens. The other thing is, if you can think of your mind like a computer, basically, and I used this example yesterday, so if you were with me yesterday, you're going to hear this again. But if I was to write an article on this, and I wrote it on my computer, and I saved it as a Word document, and I put it under blogs on my desktop inside the Confident Writer folder, in order for me to access that file, I would need to open my computer, open the Confident Writer file, open the blog file, and open the document. That document exists, but if I don't know how to access it, I can't get the information. So if someone was to open my computer like my 7-year-old and just randomly bang about on the board, actually chances are he would be able to open it. But it doesn't mean the information's not there. It means I'm no longer accessing the right pathways to liberate that knowledge. That's what mindset is. In particular situations, when you are mastering a particular skill, your focus is in a certain direction, you're using your body in a particular way, you're talking to yourself in a particular way. These are the components that form emotional state. And as a result, you're able to access that skill set because your mindset is such that you are congruent with what it is you're hoping to achieve. When you go to a competition, if your mindset shifts, it's like you banging on your keyboard trying to open the skills, but you're not going down the right avenues. So it's not that you can't do those things anymore, it's just that your mind's not in the place where you're accessing the parts of you that allow you to ride to that way. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's the difference between mindset and skill set. And you can be super confident, or your horse can be super confident, but what's really important is to break down where the weak points are. So at what point does it start to feel like things are different? And where does your focus go? So one of the key things to understand is to really approach things with a degree of curiosity. So when you're at home, you're like, what am I focusing on to produce this? Like, where is my focus? How do I talk to myself when I'm actually feeling good about my riding? And then when I go out, let's compare it to that template. Where does my focus go now? How is it that I'm talking to myself? Who is it that I'm paying attention to? What is it that I'm doing with my body? It's like a formula. Now, if you can understand the formula that allows you to produce a different result, you can take that information and transfer it to the times when you might not be having things go completely the way that you want them to. And the formula approach, it's very, obviously in our minds we're not so black and white, but this gives you a really tangible way of understanding how your mindset is created and starting to transpose those qualities across when it's perhaps not working out the way that you want it to. Yeah.
Yeah, so Jane just talked about, when you go to a show and you start thinking about all the things you weren't thinking about at home, and I talked about the horse before. So you think about where things can really go wrong. At home, your horse is in his comfort zone, and you are thinking about the things you're supposed to think about. Then you get to a horse show, and your horse is out of his comfort zone. He's distracted. He's not the same. And you are not the same. So not only has one of the duo changed, they've both changed, and neither of them are helping each other out. So that's why, for me, you've got to be able to break it down. And like for the horse part, if you go to your friend's house, okay, you're probably in the same mindset you were at home. The only thing's different is your horse now has a different area, different place. But you're still the same. So you're kind of changing one thing at a time there. And for me, it'll be all about getting that horse good before you get you good. I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg thing, but for me, when you go to a horse show, you're not used to competing and stuff, you get there, your mind is just somewhere completely different. And so it's almost like with horses. An experienced rider can ride a green horse, or you can have a green rider on an experienced horse. But green on green doesn't work. One of you has to be teaching the other one. And so for me, you know, if you haven't shown a lot, I would suggest getting the horse good first, so that when you do get to when your first time you're going to compete, and you're a little bit shaky, your horse is going to take care of you.
I've got a, part of the course that I have in my membership program called Competition Ready has a module in there called Your Crystal Ball. And really, all of this information is like your crystal ball. Most of us know how we behave or respond as a default in different environments. So if I was to say to you, you go to a competition, Kerry, how does that roll out for you? You'll go, oh my God, I'll start to feel nervous now, or I'll get there and this is how I respond. You can pretty much say to me, for the most part, what it is you are likely to do. And that's really interesting information. But what happens is that we don't do anything with it. We're like, maybe it'll be different. Or, you know, I'll take a magnesium tablet and hope for the best. And I'm not downplaying magnesium tablets, but it's just like not quite enough. And so what you can say is part of the fear process or part of the anxiety process is that it creates ambiguity. We lose clarity. And so if you can say, all right, what is it specifically that I'm concerned about in a competition environment? Or what is it specifically that I need to optimize? Because it's not always about fear. Sometimes we just want to be better. And how is it that we can take these pieces of information that we know are our likely suspects, like what will we do about it? So if I'm starting to worry about what people are doing in the stands, what am I going to do at that moment? It's not, you're not impotent, you know, you're in the driving seat, so what are you going to do about it? You always want to be working within your circle of what's in your control and influence. And for the most part, don't leave the decision making up to situations where you're under the pump. Like, work it out before you get there and train yourself to get yourself in a situation where you feel fortified in that environment as opposed to kind of buffeted around by the tide.
Yeah, something Jane just said a minute ago made me think of something else. I think a lot of, Jane's the mental coach or whatever you call yourself, but a lot of people, I think, go to a horse show knowing they're underprepared, and then go there and have a bad experience and are disappointed they had a bad experience. You know, and it might even be subconsciously, but they, you know, in my experience with a lot of people, you know, they know it's not going to work, and I really think, you know, I'm not a mental coach, but for me, with the mental part of showing the horse, I don't show them if I know it's not going to work. Okay? I'm going to make sure, I'm going to, you know, because you know, someone said, oh, you know, I had to go to a horse show the other day, my horse wasn't ready. I said, well, let me talk to the guy with the gun. And they go, who? I said, you know, the guy who held the gun to your head and made you go to the horse show. Oh, no one made me go to the horse show. I want to go to the horse show. Why? When you knew you were unprepared. Oh, well, you know, my friends were going. Or there's always a, you know, there's some sort of external thing like that. And that's, Jane touched on something a minute ago about other people's perceptions. When you start competing, one of the really hard things to get your head around is to block everything else out. You know, that, I mean, I think that's the key to competing in anything, is being able to just focus on the things you can control. And I know earlier on in my reining career, I would, you know, as a young trainer, I'd be competing and I'd be thinking about, well, that guy's got a really rich client, he's got a really nice horse, and oh, the ground's bad, or the judge is this, or those things are all outside of my control. And after a while, I learned to realise to only focus on the things I can control. Really, the only thing I can control is me. And through me, I can control my horse. But apart from that, I can't control how that guy does, how good they are, how much they pay for the horse, what the judge likes, what the judge doesn't. What you can.
A really good way that I've found myself to think about thoughts, because it's such an intangible thing, you know, like what we control of the mind and all of these things. But what I think of it is instead is every thought I have is an invitation of that experience into my reality. So I'm choosing, if I focus my attention on something that I want to avoid or something that makes me feel not great, I'm actually inviting that in. That's my decision to invite that in. And so while I'm focused on one thing, I can't be focused on another thing. If I'm focused on the guy over there, I can't be focused on my horse. If I'm focused on what somebody else is thinking, I'm not focusing on what I'm thinking. And that's the cost. Everything you choose, everything you decide to invest your energy in has a cost. And the cost has to be worth it. You know, if you're investing in that guy over there, what's the cost to you? The cost is that you're focusing on something which is draining you of resources and not doing anything to help you. So think about it as actually that's your choice. I think we've become very, we think that we're actually, things are coming at us. You know, we can't control it. We're having these thoughts, we're having these feelings, when actually we've just become so divorced from the idea that we actually are in control of what our experience is, because we're not practicing it. That's not possible for us, but it actually is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the whole competition thing is a huge mindset thing. So Jane's helped Robin and I this year get ready for the World Question Games, and Jane actually came to the World Question Games with us, and then Robin and Jane had a Cultivating Confidence workshop at our house the weekend after, or 2 weeks after the World Question Games. And there's something that Jane said in that thing that was really, really cool. I'm going to do you, Jane. Okay? Jane said, okay. She was talking about, she said, you cannot move away from something, you only move towards something. And I was thinking, what the hell is she talking about? She said, it's kind of like this. I don't want you to think about a blue tree. Do not think about a blue tree. Do not think about a blue tree that has a yellow bird in the top left-hand corner. And while you're not thinking about the blue tree with the yellow bird in the top left-hand corner, I don't want you to think about the green grass in front of the blue tree with the yellow bird in the top left-hand corner. That's right, anyway. What were you all thinking about then? The blue tree. You can't move away from a blue tree, but you can think about an orange tree. If you can think about the orange tree, the blue tree disappears. You can go towards something, you can't go away from something. And so a lot of people go to a horse show thinking about all the things that are going to go wrong. And guess what happens? They're going wrong. You want to try to focus on all the things that are going to go right, and then it gets your mind doing the things that are going to cause them to go right. I know I know more about it now after all the years competing and then being around Jane and stuff, but I know that happened many years ago. I had a horse and his left to right leg change was a little tricky. And I for a while I was getting ready to show this horse and thinking, what if he messes up that left to right leg change? And I was thinking about it not working. And then I got to thinking about, okay, hang on, let's reframe this. Instead of ignoring that it might be a problem, I go, okay, it might be a problem. So what do I have to do to make sure that it doesn't become a problem? Okay, I've got to make sure with this horse, when I come around the middle, I've got to get straight, and as he straightens up, I've got to put my right leg on and make sure he moves. He does a little leg heel slightly to the left, and then I've got to look straight ahead when I ask him to change leads and not think that way, because this horse tends to want to drop his shoulder that way. So if I even half think over there, he's going to drop his shoulder. So instead of thinking about it going wrong, and I did think about it going wrong, but then I reframed like, okay, my subconscious is telling me, I know there's a chance of it going wrong. Now I want to focus on all the things I need to do to make it go right. Instead of just being stuck in that, oh, what if it goes wrong? And, you know, that worked pretty good.
All the competition plans or riders that I work with that we're putting together a plan for competition, you want to work with what you know is likely to happen, because you thinking about what's going on the outside or being concerned about what other people think or this and that, you're not special in thinking that. We all do this, and so we can use this to our advantage. And the formula that I talked about at the start, that the components of state are your focus. So whether you're focusing on what you don't want or what you do want has a huge effect on how it is that you feel and what it is that you do as a result in terms of the action and effort you invest. Your self-talk, so how you're talking to yourself, and how you physically respond to that. So those three things are what we know form your emotional state at any one time. For instance, anxiety is one I use as an example all the time because it's just so pertinent and easy to clarify. If you're anxious, your focus goes to a future focused place, and it's always on the worst case scenario. Your self-talk says, oh my God, I don't want to do that. Or what if he does this? Or oh, what if they're watching and I make a fool of myself, and then like you say, I'm going to fall off, and then which hospital am I going to go to? Did I renew my health insurance? I don't know if I renewed my health insurance. And, you go down that rabbit hole, and then all of a sudden you produce a very vivid mental movie which results in you feeling a certain way. So you can be sitting here listening to me in Warwick, and now you're feeling anxious about riding next weekend at the competition, even though you're actually very far removed from that physically. So those are the three components, and if we know that that is the formula for anxiety, then we also know that to feel confident, You have to be focusing on what it is that's in your control, what it is that you are able to do, able to proactively do. You're asking yourself really good questions like, what needs to happen now? How can I get my horse with me? What do we need to do to be relaxed? And physiologically, you can use your breath and your body to help support that outcome. So if you work with any one of those components, they influence the other. You know, you can't have a negative focus and talk to yourself in a positive way and not have that alter how you're behaving. It's just not possible. So a performance statement is something that I do that formulates everything that Warwick was talking about in terms of proactively paying attention to what it is you need to be paying attention to. So you might have, say for instance at WEG, what was your goal at WEG? You wanted a score of 218?
217. Well, you know, our coach said to us when we got there, what do you think your horses can do? Like, you and Robin, what do you think they're capable of, realistically? And I said, oh, both of them probably 217 and a half. If we can get it all to work, if it all goes good.
Yeah. So let's say we're going for a 217 and a half. And maybe you're riding a dressage test and you're like, I want 69%, I'd be stoked with 69%. Or you're jumping and you want like a clear round. Those things are essentially outside of your control. The judges, what the judge awards you, you know, they might have had a bad day, they might have had a good day, who knows, but that's outside of your control. What is inside your control is paying attention to what it is you need to pay attention to with your horse to maximize your chances of producing that result. So with Warwick it might be, okay, so if we have a 217 and a half that we're aiming for, and I'm your instructor sitting right next to you, or your trainer, what are the three top things he would tell you to pay attention to that would really be maximising your chances of getting that 217 and a half? And it might be, you know what, coming into the stop, I really just have to let him go and then just give the 8 at the last minute. I'm totally making this up, by the way. You know, or it might be that I have to sit up, or I might have to make sure if I'm show jumping that my line coming to the jump is straight, or that I have him in front of my leg. So it could be in front of my leg, straight line, sit up. Those are your 3 directives. That's like your process goal. And the gift that gives you is it reminds you of what it is you actually have to actively be invested in to get the result that you want. And it also gives you something tangible to link onto if you find yourself going, hey, what's Jerry doing over there? You're like, it's like a pattern interrupt that you can go in front of my legs, sit up, hands forward, whatever it was I just said. You know, so it has to be short, sharp, really clear, really memorable, but it's something you know in advance that you can use to like lock into that place. Yeah?
Yeah, Jane did one of those before we went to WEG actually. Both Robin and I did it. What was I going to say? We were just talking about something, I'm getting a little bit off track here, but I just remembered something that a lot of people struggle with at a horse show is what other people think of you and your horse. That's really difficult, and the big thing competing is you've got to make sure that you know your horse, but you've got to make sure you stick to your plan. What I used to have struggled with as a young trainer going to a show, and you get there, and then you see some of the best guys in the world, and they're doing this, like, why don't you start doing that? They're doing that with that horse because it works with that horse, and then you start trying to mess with things there, and it doesn't work, and you've really got to be able to ignore that. And I've got to work with it over the years, but so at the Water Question Game, so every discipline from every team has what they call a chef d'equipe, which is basically French for chief of equipment, basically team coach. And our team coach is a friend of mine from Australia, but he hasn't been around our horses, doesn't know anything about our horses. And my horse doesn't need, like, he's a very sensitive horse, and you can't just step him up and step him up and step him up, he'll lose his mind sort of thing. And so when we would warm up at Water Question Games, it's very structured. You've got an hour and 15 minutes, you've got to ride around outside and warm up for 15 minutes, and you're coming, you've got an hour, and there'll be like 2 or 3 different teams in the arena. And so we were in there, I think, with the Austrians Belgians maybe, and Austrians or something or other, but the Belgian guy won the gold medal in the end. But so we're in there, and there's all these guys, and they're doing stuff really fast, like when it's stopping time, they're running down the stop, 1,000,000 miles an hour.
It's like a Formula One racetrack. I was like,
and a lot of times I was just cruising around, and I said to my Rodney, our team coach, I said, "Now don't think I'm losing it and I'm shutting down or I'm scared or whatever," I said. the plan for my horse is this is, if I'm not look like I'm not doing much, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. And it's hard at that level when everybody else is doing a certain thing and you're not. And it's hard to think, maybe they think I'm not, you just got to block that stuff out. I mean, what they're doing is their business. They know how to prepare their horse. I know how to prepare my horse. And, if I hadn't had with all the experience with it over the years, I probably would have struggled with it at work. But I didn't even have to struggle with it, but I just said to Rodney, I said, if you watch me and you think I'm not preparing my horse enough, I'm preparing you exactly how it needs to be prepared.
You have to, I think a lot of, or actually all disturbances or upsets are caused by us having usually unconscious and preconditioned rules about certain situations. So we have for ourselves a rule about what it is to be successful. And often these aren't designed with much thought. They're conditioned, we pick them up from various things, we haven't really thought about them much. But if I asked you, what does it take for you to feel successful? Then we know what your rules are for feeling successful. So I've had people sit in front of me that go, in order for me to be successful, I have to jump a clear round and my coach has to tell me that I've done a good job. Now the problem with that is it's completely outside of your control. You don't know what mood your coach is going to be in on a particular day. And really, feasibly, is it a reasonable expectation to every time get a clear round? It's not really. There's a lot of things that you could do really well and still not get a clear round. It could just be an accident, you could clip the rail, whatever. So you have to actually design a success metric, I call it, for yourself, that is within your control and influence. It's something that you can actually fully be in control of when you go out there. So it might be that in order for me to feel successful at the competition, I have to feel like I've stayed focused and I've done everything I can to keep my horse calm and relaxed. That might be if I'm taking my young horse out, that would be my success metric. And if I go out and I do that, then my day is successful regardless of what's happened in the context of the competition. If you can do that, then you can always set yourself up for winning, basically, but winning within the context of what you're able to actually exert influence over.
That would be a win.
Yeah. And so even in my membership, Warwick Schiller, a good friend of ours in the States, she went out to a working equitation competition on the weekend and she's got this amazing mule called Hootie, who I'm in love with. And she designed her goals and we talked about the processes and we went through the same thing. And she came away from the competition having fully ticked all those boxes. However, she didn't get good scores, according to her. And so she was having this tussle between, I did well, but I still feel kind of deflated. And that's the practice. That's part of the previous conversation that you've been having with yourself, because what happens in those situations is you use the score as an evidence to kind of shine a light on how you might be feeling about yourself or your insecurities. So that could be interesting as well. Like if she was having problems feeling like she was kind of good enough to be there and all of that sort of thing. So she's taken that to sort of be like, maybe I wasn't good enough, and it's like, hang on a minute, let's end that conversation. Think about 3 things that went really well at the competition, 3 things that you would have liked to have improved on, and 1 thing that you're going to change for next time, and then let's just call it a day. Because there's no value that you can take from that experience anymore that contributes to how you move forward. You're just choosing to beat yourself up. And
when she wrote her post on my group, your group, someone's group about it, and I'm reading it, I'm thinking, Shelley rocked, that was awesome. She got who to do this, and she did this, and she did this. And then the last paragraph is how bad she sucked. And I'm like, what horse show were you at? I'm like, I was thinking, Shelley rocked, this is awesome. And then
so Shelley, if you're listening, you did rock it.
What's that? Oh, Shelley, you rock. Yeah, and so it's all about your mental outlook on what actually happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's totally the meaning you attach to it. It's completely the meaning. And that it's really important actually to realise how much self-belief contributes to the outcomes. I think a lot of people, the stuff that I talk about, belief and believe in yourself, they're like, whatever, I can just do whatever I want. But actually belief is so important. Because if you go into a competition and you don't believe that you're good enough, and then your horse shies at the gate, and you go, see, I knew this was going to happen. And it informs then how much effort you invest in it or how much action you invest to create a different result. Then you get a result off the back of that. If that result's negative, it creates that feedback loop where you feed back in and go, see, I knew I wasn't good enough. And the opposite way around, if you actually cultivate a belief that you are good enough and you can do this, and your horse spooks and you're like, oh, come on, let's get on with it. You know, you invest a different amount of action, a different amount of effort, you get a good result, and that reinforces that loop again and again. So it's really important because it does influence directly how you perform.
Yeah, but that belief thing, I learned a lot about it this year. You talked something about your subconscious before, and I've always thought, competing, I've always thought, yeah, I know what I'm doing, I'm good enough, whatever. But I really think, subconsciously, I didn't actually believe it. On a conscious level, like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, I've got this, my horse is prepared, blah, blah, blah. But I really think somewhere deep inside I didn't believe it. And so one of the things Jane did for us this year was what do you call that thing, hypnosis?
Yeah, I made like a hypnosis audio.
And it was really cool. So Jane asked me some questions about, what I thought of this and what I thought of that. And, one of the things I want to talk about was like, self-belief. But Jane's audio that she gave to us, so you've got to listen to it with stereo headphones, and it's 35 minutes long. For the first 10 minutes, Jane's talking in both ears. But after 10, and you just kind of lulled into listening to Jane, whatever, and then after 10 minutes, it splits into two channels. So I've got Jane telling me something different in this ear than she's in this ear. So you can't listen to both of them at the same time. And you'll have to explain how it works. I don't know how it works, but you can't listen to them both at the same time. And it's supposed to tap into your subconscious. Because you're consciously listening to something, I don't know how you explain how it works, but I actually think that was one of the big reasons we did so well at WEG. I've never been that relaxed competing, doing anything. And I wasn't the place I was supposed to be relaxed. And it was kind of freaky. Like, afterwards, like, I was like sitting down drinking beer. I was like, it was easy. Here I was at the biggest. Yeah. And so I really think that whatever that thing is, I'll have to explain what it was, but I think that might have a lot to do with it. Because I think there's a lot in our subconscious that we don't think we're good enough, and then you have this false bravado. I think I'm good enough. And somewhere back down it's like, no, you're not.
In any work that I do, there's always two elements to it. There's the conscious side of it, which is kind of what we've been talking about, like the decisions that you're making, the choices when you're mindful of that moment, the strategy that you plan for, looking ahead and seeing the patterns, that's all happening consciously. But when you get that feeling that rises to the surface, like that, especially in the situations where you're like, I know I shouldn't be feeling this way, but I can't help it. That's like an unconscious driver. So your unconscious is like the lake, and your conscious one's like the canoe on the top of the lake, and we try to do everything in the canoe without paying attention to what it's swimming on. And so that's where we have to do a lot of the work as well, and that comes down to visualization practices and very specific practices that allow you to retrain that part of yourself to normalize the idea of competition, I guess, or normalize the idea of what it is that you want to be experiencing and feeling. So what Warwick's describing in the audio is, if I was to sit here with Warwick and say to him, have a conversation like this and go, Warwick, what are you talking about? You're not good enough for WEG. Like, look at you, you've got a huge following, you're talking at all these international things, you're like a really experienced trainer. And his conscious mind, even if he's going, oh yeah, thanks Jane, his conscious mind will be going, whatever, she doesn't really know me, she doesn't know the real me, she doesn't truly know what it's like. So it's like a boxer-size class where they're like kicking out all the good stuff. And so in order to get to that more subliminal space, you have to go stealth. You have to kind of go undercover, and that's where the audio is structured in a specific way where you get into a quite relaxed state. And you've taken the brainwaves down a notch or two, sort of like just before you fall asleep. And your conscious mind's not so active, it's not quite as vocal at that point.
Is that why you made the first 10 minutes so boring?
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, oh yeah, Jane's just bloody rabbit going about something. I'm probably not even listening to Jane anymore because this is boring. And then, whoo!
So then if you were to keep on at some point, you feel like you should be paying attention. That's your conscious mind, like, oh, keep listening, keep following what she's saying. So when it goes into two ears, there's like the narrative that I keep going on with that goes through the right ear, and in the left ear we start talking about the stuff that we've designed together, like the self-belief and all of the different bits and pieces that we really want to get in there. Because unconsciously you're always paying attention. Like there's a massive amount of information that you absorb at any one time. It's just that there's only so much that comes to the conscious awareness because you have to function as a person, you know. So consciously you're always uploading information, and so this is where I start talking in a different ear about that stuff, and your conscious mind goes, hey, listen to this ear, hey, listen to this ear, hey, listen to this ear, and you go like, actually I can't follow either. And so you just stay in that kind of deep space, and that's where it becomes effective, yeah.
Yeah, because I wasn't supposed to listen to both, was I?
No, you're not.
No, I couldn't. You try to listen to this one, try to listen to that one, and then you just kind of stop listening.
Yeah.
Is that what I was supposed to do? Because I stopped listening to you, Jane, like...
But that's the point. We want to stop the box exercise.
Yeah. And so I really think that was one of the big things, because like I said, I've never felt that relaxed competing at any level, let alone at that level.
But really the idea is to become congruent, you know, you want an alignment between the thought and the feeling. So when you go to competition, you don't want that discrepancy between like, it's awesome, and feeling like, God, we can't get a toilet. And so, you know, that's what you're really wanting to line up, and that familiarization process doesn't have to happen in the reality. It can happen unconsciously, because through visualization, through understanding how your unconscious mind processes information, which is by your sensory system, you can create a vivid illustration that allows you to kind of feel like you've been there before. Part of confidence is feeling like it's familiar. You know, if you feel like if you were to come to Equidays every day for the next 50 days and sit in the space, it would lose its, it would lose its specialness, because it's just part of what you do. And so if you can mentally rehearse what it is you're coming to experience, then on an unconscious level there's a degree of familiarity that becomes associated with that, and that in and of itself brings confidence. But it's also the way that you detach yourself from an experience that you've been having in the past that might not be favourable, and create a new one moving forward, because you step into a creationary space as opposed to a reactionary space where you're recurring the patterns and recurring the themes, and you create a new pattern and a new thing to sort of step into.
I'm listening, Jane. I love listening to you. How much time do we got left? You know?
Does anyone have any questions?
7 minutes. Yeah, do you have any questions? About competition or anything? Because this is not about competition. We did a mindfulness thing yesterday. It's the same thing. It's all. And what are we doing tomorrow? It's about confidence. Anxiety. It's the same thing. It's all about being present and controlling your mind and controlling what you think about. You know, thinking about the orange tree instead of trying to not think about the blue tree. You guys don't have any questions? No?
Perfect.
What else? Oh, yes.
So the question is, what about for little kids? How do you build their confidence? Like 11, 12, you say? Yeah. So, yeah. Totally, yeah. So you want to actually recognize what represents their comfort zone to start with. Like, if you can ascertain where is it they're super comfortable, and what represents a step outside that. Like, at what point do they start to feel that, that little kind of increase in the pressure cooker? And then you just go to that space, and then you take it back off.
This is like training horses.
Yeah. So you just want to be really clear on not... What happens is we take someone from a space over here and it's all good, and then we throw them over there and we wonder why it's not good. So if you can, again, it's the same concept really of just breaking down the different elements of exposure and just introducing those in a way that is A, fun, and B, isn't too much. So you might go with your child to the show, but be like, you know what? why don't we just like ham graze him for the morning and you can run off and get a drink or something, and then when everything's calmed down, why don't you jump on and ride your pony around when you're both feeling pretty good about life, and we'll have a bit of a trot and then we'll call it a day. You know, and that association comes with like, well, mum's here to have fun. Mum just wants me to have fun. Because a lot of it comes from the modelling of their expectation of what they think they should be doing in this place. And also, the other thing is that from a very early age, you can teach about fixed mindset and growth mindset, which is, my favourite question is, are you here to prove or are you here to improve? So if you can be with your child and be like, you know, why don't you get out there and just do the best you can, and if they're like, oh, it didn't work, it's like, well, what did that tell you? You know, like, what can we take from that? What can we do differently? Or we saw your pony did this, like, how can we make him feel more relaxed about this situation? So as a parent or as a caregiver, you can be directive in pointing their attention to what it is they're wanting to create, as opposed to them going, don't pull on him, or don't kick him like that, or don't do this. It's like, you know, like, you want positively geared direction. And I think that's the biggest thing you can amplify, because as parents it's very easy to step into the mode of like lockdown. Like, let's protect them from that, let's don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And it comes from a good place. But again, if you can think about what's the opposite of that, what is it that I'm wanting them to do? And how can I direct the instruction that way, you know, and sort of lead them in that direction? Does that help? Yeah.
Well, I can give you a very good example of what Jane said at the start about taking them outside their comfort zone and letting them go back in. So I did a clinic in New Zealand here a few years ago, and someone who may or may not be sitting in this stand right now was in this particular clinic, and she had been in some clinics before, and she's kind of a timid sort of a rider, but she'd been riding an older horse. She comes to this clinic, she's got a young horse she has started herself. She's done all the groundwork, she's done the first ride, she's done the walk, she's done the trot. She hasn't cantered this horse, but someone else has. So she knows this horse will canter, but she's feeling concerned about cantering the horse. So at the start of the clinic, I said, so what are you up to? And she told me that story right there. And when she said, I'm concerned about cantering, her face went white. Just the thought of cantering, her face went white. And she said that my friend over here, she's cantered the horse, and she's kind of been helping me with the get to the canter. And I said, okay, so how has she been helping you with that? She goes, well, what she wants me to do is she wants me to trot and then trot faster to get to the canter. When she said faster, her face went white. I said, okay, so how fast in kilometres an hour do you think you're comfortable trotting is? And she said, I don't know, 5. And I said, and how fast do you think she wants you to trot? She's like, 10. Okay, so would you trot your horse 6 kilometres an hour? And she thought about it, and I said, for one stride. She goes, oh yeah, I can do that. I said, okay, off you go. So this is a 3-day clinic, okay? She starts trotting around, and she's totally comfortable at 5 kilometres an hour. I said, so okay, let's go ahead and go up to 6. She gets to 6. I said, good, now come back to 5. And when she went up to 6, she was a bit tense, come back to 5. And I left her at 5 for a while until she was completely relaxed again. Just out of the comfort zone, back in. I had to do that. You know, I do a morning session and afternoon session. She was in, I think, the morning session. But that's all she got done that day, was go from 5 to 6, back to 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 6, 5. That day that was done. Come back the next day. I said, how are you feeling with the 5 to 6 to 5? She goes, so she does that a few times. I said, okay, what I want you to do is go 5, 6, 7, 6, 5. That's all we did that day. The next, because a lot of times with a young horse, trying to get them to canter, instead of asking them to canter, I'll just get them to trot bigger and smaller, and bigger and smaller, and bigger and smaller, then bigger, and they just roll into the canter and don't get tight about it. So the third day, we come back and I said, okay, how do you feel about the 7? So she does the 5, 6, 7, 6, 5. It's all good. I said, okay, what I want you to do is go 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5. Just touch the 8, come back in. Then I left her to do it. So I start helping someone else, and 5 minutes later, everybody goes, and I look up, and here she is, cantering around, completely relaxed, because it's the thought of getting to 10 that scares the hell out of you. They're in 5, and you're going to go to 10. That's scary as hell. But when she went to 6 and back again, oh, that was comfortable. And then 7. When she got to 8, by the time she got to 8, she's like, I might as well just canter. And so really, it's just that stepping outside your comfort zone and coming back in. I don't think you want to take them outside their comfort zone and keep them out till they're good with it, because they can kind of shut down. You just got to, you know, out and in and out and in, and then you get further out and come back in, and further out and come back in, and like this lovely young lady, she just off the breath, and then I couldn't stop her from cantering around. Like, whoa, give yours a rest.
a kind of good formula to think of is if 80 to 90% of the time you're hitting the mark, so you can do the do, it's no problem, you're in your comfort zone. You and your horse are in your comfort zone. About 50-50, like if 50% of the time you're able to do it, 50% of the time, it's that feeling of like trying to remember a name and it's on the tip of your tongue and there's kind of like a sense of frustration attached to it, but you're not completely out of your mind with it. That's the sweet spot, that's the training zone where things are happening, like you're reconfiguring the pathways, you're extending your comfort zone, you know, you're pushing that limit. And then beyond that, that's where we get into the survival zone. You know, the just get me the hell out of here zone, where you just want to press abort, someone's having a meltdown, and there's nothing really you can do at that point to bring them back because the blood's gone from the rational part of their brain back to that, oh my God, I need to survive part of the brain. And so at that point, you actually need to stop, let everything come down and then start again. There's no point really doing anything there. And if you feel or see that happening, then you just need to taper it back, the same way that you were talking about it, yeah.
Yeah, I think the scientists call it homeostasis. Potentially is. That's probably a little bit of time for us, Jane. So thank you guys
Thank you
for
so much.
coming. Hopefully you got something out of that. I will be over at my booth for a little while. I'm going to do another demo soon. But Jane, you
Over at my booth for a little while too.
So Jane's booth is opposite the Wilson sisters. Everybody knows where that one is. So if you've got any questions about that stuff, Jane will probably be quite happy to answer. Thanks so much for coming.